Hello, everybody. My guest today is Dr. Stephen Reinlie. Stephen's one of my oldest friends. I've known Stephen for almost 20 years, a couple months shy of 20 years. We were college roommates, college teammates together. Stephen is a practicing chiropractor. His practice is called In Motion Sport and Spine, based out of kind of North Austin, Round Rock area. He's been practicing in his disciplines, which I think really focuses around rotational sport, but mainly adult athletes kind of in general. He's been practicing that way for 12 plus years, so really knows what he's doing. In my friendship with Stephen, I've just gotten to know him really well and his character and how much he cares for his family. So in this conversation, we talk a lot about his professional life. We talk about his practice philosophy. We talk about work-life balance and the things that he places importance on in raising his kids and what kind of a husband he is. We cover a lot of territory like we normally do. So with that said, I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Dr. Stephen Reinlie. And I kept telling him, RV, we got to get those stories written down somewhere because I'm going to take Lincoln and Lawson there forever.
Sure.
You know, they find as much meaning to the cabin as we do.
Sure.
And I want to have all those stories for them. I want to know where all this stuff came from and why y'all made decisions the way you did. And anyways, long story long, he told me he was going to start writing them down. Every time I'd see him, he'd say, "Hey, I'm still thinking about what I'm going to write down, and I'm taking notes on all the things I'd want to have a write-up about." And then trying to get him to the cabin the last 5 or 6 years has been really difficult.
Sure.
He's just a 90-something-year-old man, and going to altitude he wasn't real excited to do. And how we finally convinced him to want to go one more time is to tell him the easiest thing for us to do would be to just record you telling these stories instead of having to go write each one of them down and rely on your memory in that way. Just tell the story and I'll record it. And so Matt helped us put together a kit of cameras, lights, mics.
Did you do that up there at the...
And the way I pushed him over the edge was to take Sam with us. So Sam got a week off from his job. And it was like, hey, if something's going to happen, a Green Beret medic can probably help you, you know, with altitude sickness.
Yeah.
Let's go do it. So we recorded 2 different sit-down sessions with him where he talked first about the cabin, the structure.
Sure.
And then the second part was all the things inside the cabin.
I mean, that's... storytelling is, not that it ever died off, but it's definitely making a comeback.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, the hard part for me with that has been what to do with all that content.
Well, there's a lot of people don't even know what to do and where to find stories anymore. You know, like there's just so many places that you can get stories, and then you can consume things so quickly. And then you were swimming in it.
Yeah.
Right. And I think there is a big market, and people are craving just good storytelling without being sold. Like this, like at some point you do have to make profits. I'm not speaking necessarily to this. I'm just speaking like so much of the podcasting, the things that I enjoy or listen to or consume are because people are just telling me a story.
Yeah. I think the technology has enabled that to be monetized now in a way that it's never been able to before.
Sure.
And what seems to resonate with people is things that are real, things that are actually true, and not things that are totally produced. Not that total production doesn't also sell because Marvel movies exist.
Well, it's different too, because like fiction, or even if it is like nonfiction, you know, for like Serial is a prime example of their podcast. And they would interweave little things and some true crime stuff. You hear wheels screeching.
It's called
like,
Serial?
Have you heard of Serial
No.
before? You haven't? Oh man, that was like the OG crime podcast. I think that was back before we had the house that we're currently in.
So it's not spelled Cereal.
No, it's like serial killer.
Yeah, got it now when you said crime.
Oh man, there's true crime. That was another good one. I mean, I haven't been in that world in probably 7 or 8 years.
That's all my wife listens to.
She would love
crime podcast.
If she hasn't heard of Serial, then
She probably has.
I would say that would be very odd.
Yeah.
For sure.
Wow.
But yeah, like storytelling, whether it's just people having a dialogue, right? And then we get to listen as a podcaster, and you're almost voyeuring in on someone else's really cool stories, right? You get invited to their campfire, so to speak. You know, like I think there's a lot of that people still want.
Yeah.
I mean, we have been immersed in that as a culture and a species for, since we made
Since
fire.
we've been a species,
Yeah,
right?
basically.
Yeah.
Started out as grunts, and now here we are.
It can endear somebody to the product that you sell to, which is an interesting, like a through line in what I do for a living and what you do for a living, where there's not a whole lot of overlap. Like
Sure.
your ability to sell your services as a practicing chiropractor, or is that how you would explain yourself? Doctor?
I don't know. Honestly, I struggle with that all the time. I was listening to a PT talk about that, and he said he calls himself a body consultant, and I was like, I don't know. I tried that once, and I was like,
That's pretty meta.
That didn't fit. That glove got stuck halfway on. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I would describe it as doctor question mark.
Yeah.
Doctor
I don't even go
asterisk?
by doctor. Like it just feels really.
In what context
Snoopy.
would you introduce yourself as Dr. Stephen Reinlie?
Only if someone else was doing it. Like when I go out and coach, or when I'm at a place where I'm doing some type of health screening or whatever, I oftentimes get introduced. I think it's out of respect, right? They're like,
right.
They realize I've earned a title. I've never once pushed that onto them where I'm like, hey, it's Dr. Reinlie, okay?
Right. Excuse me, try again.
It's never, I don't know. It just, my work is so friendly. I'm trying to create what they call therapeutic alliance really quick, because I'm trying to get people to do something uncomfortable, pay for it, and be consistent, right?
Right.
And so I practice in a t-shirt half the time, right? I'm trying to remove some
Some of the formality to
stiff
it.
upper lip barriers and formalities and all those things. And so my international clients that are immigrants or what have you, they always call me doctors. Most of the time they call me Dr. Reinlie. They don't even go to Stephen. Occasionally I get Dr. Stephen. Those are sometimes older clients, that come from the age where doctors were a big deal, right? But all my younger clients, I don't even bother.
You're just Stephen.
I'm always been Stephen. I always introduce myself as Stephen.
Yeah.
It's just how it is.
Yeah. Well, to call yourself a chiropractor,
it's impossible to explain.
it's a total misnomer.
People think I just go, and that's what I do all day,
right?
Which is not even close.
And how long have you been practicing now? 12, 13
12 and
years?
a half years.
12 and a half
12
years.
and a half years.
In the 12 and a half years you've been practicing, I don't see you a whole lot. I see you sparingly, but every time I do have some kind of an injury, I do see you. I can count on one hand the amount of times you've actually adjusted me in a chiropractic way, or where your head would go if you think of a chiropractor.
Yep.
So it's
Our profession,
the word doesn't capture it very well.
So our profession married itself to a modality.
Right.
It'd be all of your employees being like, oh yeah, I just use keyboards and mouses or mice, whatever.
Yeah.
And you're well, not really.
Right.
There's touch screens. I can just tell you how to fix your problem. There's so many different ways, and that's probably a very under hitting the mark analogy, because I don't know IT well, but it's a tool. Spinal manipulation or joint mobilizations, when it's published in the literature or research, they call it spinal manipulation. Occasionally it'll be written as chiropractic manipulation, but it's just a modality to help people feel better, right? Or improve range of motion or what have you. And then through the course of how the term chiropractic came to be in the late 1800s, it got married to that idea. And then as we've evolved from a practice standpoint, and as research and all the things that create what we currently have today have come into play, in my opinion, the best way to use it is it's just a tool, right? But it's going to take a few generations to untether ourselves from that, because that's what people know us for, right?
Right. Well, you also have people in your profession that only
do that
the
too.
old school adjustment.
And they just have that philosophy. And I'm not going to be here to designate an opinion on that. Everybody's got their choice of how they want to provide care to people, right? As long as you're doing it ethically and honestly and all that stuff, which I think the vast bulk are for sure. But my license, in effect, just allows me to work with people, and as long as I'm not prescribing drugs and performing surgery, of which obviously I can't do, don't do, all those things. But if it's strength training, if it's exercise advice, if you want to talk a little nutrition, if you want to talk sleep, if you want to talk strategies to cope with chronic pain, if you want soft tissue work, if you want spinal manipulations, if you want a strength training program to help you run a certain speed, jump a certain height, you can dive into those rabbit holes and you can be the guy that, oh yeah, I just work with basketball players and I just help them optimize their performance. Or you can be a jack of all trades and be a big Swiss Army knife. Like, that's what's neat is the way I think about it is I've got a license that allows me to work in this chunk of the continuum of the population, right? And then it's up to me to decide what tools do I want to have to serve the people that I want to have, and then how do I connect with those people.
Right. Okay, so you're building a practice and you're early enough in your build stage that you could kind of pick a path. Do you, when you look at the paths you could go down, I can either go hyper specialty and just do rotational sports like golf and baseball, or I can be really, really broad and do anybody that considers themselves athletic or pursuing athleticism.
Sure.
Have you picked a lane? Would you want to pick a lane?
It's tough because I'm really curious.
Yeah.
Like, it's easy for me to get sucked into different rabbit holes, and like I suffer from curiosity, which is a good thing to suffer from most of the time, right? And then I suffer from wanting to get really good at those things too, right? So you can get sidetracked easy. I don't know if that's like an ADHD type quality, but it's like, it's very easy for me to be like, oh man, there's a whole bunch of people that are hurting with this, and I'm not afraid to get in there and get my hand, roll up my sleeves and get dirty and figure out how I can be better at that. Like, chronic pain is one of those things. We have an epidemic of people that don't know how to help themselves get out of chronic pain, and there's definitions for that, and some people are mislabeled and blah blah blah, and we can, if you want, get into those details, but like, sometimes how you converse with those people, how you prescribe care is not just how you would for the classic person that maybe just twisted an ankle and they've only been dealing with it for 6 days, right? And so there's nuance there, and I love the nuance. So to kind of answer the questions, like, yeah, I have figured out my niche. Anybody that's in my business and I want to, like, you have to start at the top, which is how do you want to earn your income? Do you want to be in network with insurance and play that game, which is a game, or do you want to not be in that game, right? And then you could say you're out of network, or you can say you're purely cash. The difference between those is out of network, you would provide them with codes that they could submit to their insurer for out-of-network benefits. To get some sort of a... Yes. Cash is where you say, I don't even do that game.
Right.
Like, you are just here.
So have you picked a lane there?
So yeah, I'm going to be out-of-network and cash, mostly because when you are in network, you actually work for the insurance company, right? Because they're ultimately, I mean, whoever pays the bill is who you work for, right?
Yeah, good point.
So not to say that you can't work for your clients, but now you have someone hanging over you,
right,
that's also dictating, like, well, how many visits you get, did you play the right game, did you submit the right codes, did you do all these other things that have nothing to do with actually making eye contact, explaining to them it's going to get better, I'm really sorry that this happened, or hey, I understand you've been in pain for the last 7 years and you had a botched surgery. Or it's just simple, like, I'm going to miss my baseball game this weekend, right? There's so many of those emotional layers, and not everybody's an emotional mess. But, I mean, everybody can relate going to the doctor's office and feeling unsteady or uncertain about what the heck's about to happen. So then you adulterate it with someone else, someone. And now your decisions get tweaked a little bit.
Right.
Well, crap, I really would want to do this, but then I got to sell them that because it's a cash-based service, but I really think it could be beneficial. But
then you're worried about whether or not you can even get paid for it because the insurance might
and then
not
you're going to get
cover it.
hosed, and then you validate their insurance, and then it comes back and they tell you it's going to be this, and then maybe we didn't bill quite the right code, or maybe they don't see it as necessary from an insurance standpoint. Then you send them a bill 7 months from now, like, well, what the heck? I thought I already paid for this, right? We've had kids.
Right.
Those bills just like, I think I'll keep getting them forever, right? Like, you're like, I thought I already closed out my labor and delivery.
Any ER visit, you're going to get
for
bills
sure.
for 6
You're
months.
like, holy smokes, you're going to charge me for walking in the hallway? I didn't know that was a thing, right?
Right.
How am I supposed to get to the room? So I just don't want to play that game because it's just, there's too much mental energy that's spent on that. And then what they won't tell you, and the dirty truth is, the more resources you have and the more lawyers you have and the more rabbit holes you want to get into, the better you can get reimbursed. So there's a reason why big healthcare conglomerates, because they can just swing their weight around and say, no, 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 no. We're going to get reimbursed at this rate because we hit all these check marks.
Yeah.
And then we can just drive all these practitioners into the ground because we have all the jobs, right? And so you have, when you go out and hang your own shingle and you're on your own, to be competitive in that other market, the outer network cash, fee for service, whatever you want to call it, you need to niche. You have to. At least that's all the experts that I've listened to. And so the lane I'm picking in is adult fitness, for sure. That will always be the bread and butter and pay the bills because I have kids. Because if I just did athletes, then I need to be available until 7, 8, maybe 9 o'clock at night because kids are in school, right?
You also know that client base well because that's you.
Correct. And
Right.
then the other piece of it too, for better or worse, is parents are tough. When you're not the one on the table, like things get awkward. Oh, did you do your exercises? I did. Like, you know, you get caught up in those things, right?
Right.
And then you get the 16-year-old girl that's like, you know, like, mom, get out of the room. But mom's, you know, mom, and she wants to be in there, right? And so, like, now I'm playing intermediary.
Right.
And I got to make sure I give mom enough face time because she's paying for it.
Right.
And she's concerned, right? And she never does her stretches. I have to get on her homework, right? And then I got the potentially moody 16-year-old girl that's trying to find her place in the world. And then she doesn't want to be there because, like, can you just fix my ankle? I really want to play basketball, right? And it's not always like, most of them are a joy to work with. So,
Yeah.
But what I'm getting at is, like, all youth sports, not going to work. I think you can't, like, make that your bedrock unless maybe you're single or you're older or whatever, and, like, you have some flexibility, or you're just wicked niched out and very good at selling and very good at Instagram, and you charge a lot.
Right.
Right. So, like,
So is it also a good filtering mechanism for bad? Would you say client or patient? Do you say client or patient?
I oscillate between the two.
Okay,
Like, so
we'll say patient.
Yeah. So
Since
when
you're a
I'm
doctor.
note taking, I say patient. When I talk to my clients, I say client. And it just feels stuffy.
Okay, so with a client who is coming to you knowing they're not going to be able to hit their insurance for it, they're going to pay out of pocket. Is it a good filtering mechanism for the ones that you don't want? Because if they're paying out of
charge
pocket,
enough.
yeah,
If you charge enough, right? And so, and then at the other end of the spectrum is, there's a lot of really great people that just, it is tough, you know, and if you charge too much, you skin people alive when they do get really, really hurt. Like, you've known me, like, I had that horrible episode of a disc herniation and all of the pain down my left leg, and my wife, Austin, right, she put on my shoes for like almost 4 weeks straight, right? And I limped into work and I faked it as much as I could so I wouldn't have all my clients be like, what's wrong with you? You're like, no, it's about you. It's not about me, right? So I'm like trying to hide it, right? And, you know, you might need to be heavy with your care in the beginning. And if you're too expensive, like there's a part of me that's like, I'm not trying to get rich quick off people's pain. I also do need to be paid, and I need to keep the lights on, and I need to have some freedom. But at the same time, like, there's this, you know, like, how do you balance that? And then you also get into the point where you can't treat everybody. And some of those people that are really in a bad spot, maybe they met you and they weren't in a terrible spot. They just came in because, like, hey, my coach told me to come here because I need to work on my squat. My hip does get a little tight. So it's like a mild complaint. They like, know, and trust you, and then they come back and they have a horrible complaint a year or 2, 3, 4 years later when they actually did hurt themselves with something else. And now your model almost, I wouldn't say works against them, but, like, it can really skin them. So part of, like, being my own boss, like, now I get to pull the lever on, hey, just come in tomorrow. I'll take care of it, right?
yeah,
Like, you're a great client to me.
Right.
We'll figure out the money part. I just want to take care of you, right? Which will be a super gratifying thing to do, to not only to build relationships, but, like, we ultimately, when you're in our shoes, and I think this could be broad to almost all disciplines, is we should be here to help people, you know?
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting point because you have a potential conflict of interest in that you get paid when a patient comes to see you and you register a visit. And if you do your job exceedingly well, you're going to have less visits.
Well, see, here, I was in this group talking about that exact thing. And so with the way that our current insurance model works, you are somewhat rewarded for being worse at your job. And that's, that's an overgeneralization, right? But if we go to value-based care and you change it to where, hey, you had X diagnosis and you actually got better faster than the average, you could make the argument that that group should get paid more from the insurance, right? You shouldn't be penalized because you did your job better.
Right.
It is not that simple, and it's not in a vacuum. People are going through stress, which can dramatically impact how you respond from a painful experience. And I will say painful experience because pain is not 2 + 2 = 4. Pain sometimes is 2 + 2 and equals 3 or 7 or 6 or 22. Like, it's an experience, right? So we've all had a paper cut, and that hurts like a motherfucker, right? I can say that here, right?
Yeah,
okay,
okay with
cool. Okay, cool. And like, are you damaged? Well, no, right? And then you've probably had a paper cut before, so intuitively, just suck it up. It'll go away in a minute, right? And so that's a bit of a generalization, but sometimes it's helpful for people to understand that pain is an experience, and maybe you have a really crappy work situation. Maybe you do smoke and are diabetic, right? So we already know that your nervous system, immune system, your physiology is wound up to be a little bit more on the sensitive side. Maybe you have a mechanical fault with how you move, which is driving some of your pain. Maybe you are depressed, or you have a lower self-efficacy. We're like, well, my dad had a bad back, my sister has a bad back, I'm just gonna have a bad back, right? And so you have all these other things that come in here and stir that painful experience pot that, as a clinician, you have largely limited control over. Now, it's our job to identify those things, but I mean, how many of us dated girl after girl after girl after girl after girl only to find out 4, 6, 8, 12 dates in, oh, this girl's crazy, right? Like, so to expect a clinician to figure that out on a visit or 2 or 3, and then your client is like, hey, when's this gonna wrap up? I need to get better. You're in a really tight spot there.
Yeah.
And so to go back to this value-based care, in a pie in the sky, yeah, it makes a ton of sense. And in the trenches and how it actually works, that's a tough system too, because you have so many things that you can't control, and you don't know if they're gonna go home and do their stuff, if they're getting enough sleep, if they're drinking enough water, if they're getting good nutrition. There's just so many of those things. So I've always felt like it's best if the client, the patient, has more control over what they perceive as value in their care. And what a lot of people, like, I know the layperson would have no idea about this, but the people in the healthcare community, they'll beat the drum on, like, limited care, limited MRIs, x-rays, all that stuff. Well, a lot of those studies that tell us that there is no value in getting an MRI early, or it might lead to more procedures, are done in countries that have socialized healthcare. So you think their lens doesn't give you every reason to be like, how do we get the best value out of it? And now we're trying to apply their research to our capitalistic way of handling healthcare. Sometimes there's extreme value in just reassuring a client, hey, your scan looks good.
Right. Yeah, there's nothing structurally wrong.
And the other flip side of that is like, hey, you need to take this serious.
Right.
Right? Like, because maybe they're not. Like, I'll use scans sometimes to, like, I need you to see it so you can get on board, start doing the things that I'm asking you to do. So you take
this seriously because it's not going to get better otherwise.
Oh, man, you have to. You can't be a technician.
Yeah.
You just can't. You have to show up and do your job.
Yeah. Man, let's talk about that a little bit. So in your job, we explain it a lot as IQ, EQ scale, IQ, EQ balance. And in your job, the IQ portion would be knowing functionally how the body works, where when it fails, it tends to fail, being able to do the job mechanically versus being able to do the job from an emotional standpoint. That's the EQ side, is like the people skill of connecting with the patient, understanding, to your point, what success is going to look like to them early on, so that you can deliver an experience for them that they'll see value in.
Yep.
In your opinion, what makeup of a practitioner works best in your world? Where does IQ, EQ...
probably depends on your discipline.
Okay.
Right? Like, there are some orthos I refer to that clients will tell you they're not super warm and fuzzy.
Like an orthopedic surgeon?
Yeah.
Yeah. They're very high IQ.
Candidly, put me back together, doc.
Right.
We can be buddies some other time and place, right?
Right. Yeah,
but
in that role, it might benefit them to
Correct.
be more IQ than EQ.
And sometimes there's damning things that they'll say to you, like, hey man, you're just never going to do X again, right? But a good person in my shoes that maybe I heard someone explain it this way, like, and I'm just going to use musculoskeletal because that's what I'm an expert in. The orthopedist is like the fire department. They come in and they put out the fire. They're not the ones that come back and rebuild your house.
Right.
So we're the guys, PTs, chiros, that rebuild your house. Now, we can come in and help put out the fire too. There are fires that we for sure can handle. We probably straddle a much larger degree of that continuum, and then the orthopedist is over here.
Yeah,
But
you
if
can
you've
catch
got
it when it's smoldering.
Yeah, smoldering, small fire, maybe it burned some bacon and that type of thing, right?
Right.
I was over
You're the baking soda.
So when I was doing this podcast earlier in the week, the one of the guys' roommates comes in and it's like, the grill is on fire. Should I throw some water on it? And I walked out there, I was like, no, dude, that's a grease fire. Bad idea,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And all the steaks are just flying, burning and stuff after we finished up. That was our dinner. Steaks were still good, so maybe he figured something out. It's like a sous vide with a grease fire.
Right, yeah,
right?
yeah. All you got to do is catch them on fire with grease.
Yeah, it works. But my point with that is like, those orthopedists have a very significant role, and their IQ probably needs to be extremely high, and you're going to probably suffer a little bit in the EQ department. And then you have all the people in my shoes where you have to have a blend of both. And if you want to work with everybody, you probably need to have great range. And if you're going to work with a certain subtext, then you're going to probably find yourself really going after, I do great with engineers, or I do great with moms, right? Whatever, right? So as I've mentored other chiros or PTs, I've said like, look, there's a reason why Baskin-Robbins has 34 flavors, whatever it is, right? And there's a reason why pistachio is in every ice cream parlor. Sometimes you're just pistachio. Be pistachio. No one's asking you to be vanilla.
Right.
What do we get with vanilla? There are some people that love vanilla. My wife loves vanilla, right? But there are some people who are like, at least it's still ice cream. It's adequate, right? And then there are people that love all those other flavors. So you just need to, one, practice it long enough, get enough reps, so you can figure out what flavor you are, and then lean into that and start to identify what am I convicted about so I can sell, not in a sleazy way, but I am selling you on you need to do these things so you can get better, especially the chronic pain people that maybe have failed therapy 3, 4, 6, 12 times. You really are offloading their baggage. They've come in, maybe someone was rude to them at the last office, maybe someone said some damning things to them at the last office. Now you got to remove those thought viruses and debug that part of their RAM, right? And then you've got to get in there and reframe and give them a new context. And so I might be really good with those people that need some of that like massaging up top too, right? Versus the next person might, be really good at just espousing all of the sexy strength training, rehab-y, sports-specific things, right? And so I just feel like there's so many people to serve, right? And you just got to figure out what you're good at, and then you just go for those people, and then those people find you because generally we, fly with the same birds.
Right.
And we're like, oh, go see this guy because he really helped me with X, Y, or Z.
Yeah, and ultimately building a service business, which at the end of the day is what you're doing.
100%.
Right? We were talking about this in the green room, that we both look at what we do more comparable to a tradesman than to something different. Like when people are talking about what we do for a living, we tend to get thrown in a tech bucket.
Sure.
We're a tech company. And
Sure.
we're really not that at all.
Sure.
We have no product. The people are our product.
Right.
So being in a customer service business like you're in order to do that over the course of the next 10 years, to build that practice, you kind of have to look at people with that individual, like, what is it going to take? What's the cocktail for this person to really understand what I'm doing and buy into it?
Yep.
And just know the more you can execute on that with them, the
Yep.
more business it's going to result in long term, because they'll want to send you people.
That's the thing, right? So you go after your niches, and then just because you helped Ken's shoulder playing baseball as a 17-year-old in high school, it doesn't mean that you're going to see all of Ken's friends. You might also have Ken's mom going, well, I have this knee thing. Do you work on knees? And then Ken's mom tells the person that does her hair, you have a knee thing too? Oh, my knee's been doing great, right? And so you leave your niche. Your niche is you take care of people, really. That's your business.
Right.
But it started with a shoulder.
Right.
Right? And it started with your niche.
Yeah.
And then it grows because people just know, like, and trust you.
Right. So talk about, in the course of putting your practice together, you have a family. This is one of the things, so I guess we could have started with the history of our friendship. We're almost at 20 years of friendship, which makes you one of my oldest friends.
What are you getting me?
I was going to ask what you brought. But one of the things I think has linked us together so long is that we both got married around the same time. We had kids around the same time. Our boys are vaguely the same age, and they like each other. So being around each other,
pretty easy.
We can do that more, right? How do you think about work-life balance? Is there such a thing as work-life balance? When you do feel like you're balanced, what does that look like for you? And I get it, it's different at different stages, but how are you thinking about that in building your practice?
So I don't know if I'd say I'm a contrarian here, but my views on that were probably more concrete in my infancy of being a professional. And what I mean by that is kind of that concrete level of thinking where there's something physical, like there's a path to follow, and there's this, ability to balance both, right? I don't think that exists, right? Really, it's more abstract in the sense that I'm in a stage right now where I'm going to be burning the candle at three ends. It's like go, 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 go. I'm really well aware of that is not sustainable, right? But that being said, there are times where work-life balance from an academic standpoint just won't make sense. It's really hard to be balanced and to make things move. You need an initial big thrust to get the rocket into outer space, right? So where I'm at in that journey is I might be pulling 70-hour weeks. I might be thinking all day long about how I'm going to get my business off the ground and lifting off and moving and just doing that whole thing, right?
Yeah.
And that's okay. Now, the trick is rising above that thought process of work-life balance and going, how can, one, I sustain this, and then two, or make my chosen discipline sustainable, but two, what does the rest of my life look like? Have I sown enough good seeds and good will with my family and my friends to where maybe I'm not putting as much into them temporarily that they know, like, he's doing this thing and he's not only doing it for himself, he's doing it for us, right? I think that's on you as a man to put those things forward. It's also on you as a professional to put your phone on D&D or leave it in your car or whatever and go in and say, I'm going to give the next 35 minutes to my family and just be present, right? And so it's not about the amount of time. It's not about the amount of anything. It's about how you make an impact, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's a very up and down thing, and I think there's different ways that we all find to be content. And part of, for me at least, being content is I do need to have a good group of friends, a good family structure, and then just being acutely aware of what that looks like.
Yeah.
And being able to shift gears real quick if I need to. So it is very nuanced. And I feel fortunate because I've gotten 12 and a half years of just living day to day in nuance. I've had 20 opportunities Monday through Friday, essentially, to just hit refresh and start over with a completely different dialogue, with a completely different person, with a completely different situation.
Yeah.
And so over time, if you're paying attention to those things, which, I've been fortunate to really dig into that, I've been able to develop that muscle to where I can just walk into a room and largely know what the temperature is. And I
Yeah.
think that's important from a professional standpoint.
Yeah, the work-life balance thing is tough. It's been one of the common topics of conversation with people that have been in here. That, you know, if you're really driven to excel professionally, but you also value the home life and building a family, those two things tend to work in opposition to each other.
Well, you invite them along on the ride too,
Oh yeah, certainly.
right? So I like that. Like there are some people that just are unaware of it or don't know how to do it or don't want to do it, right? And so as a man, I need to model that to I have 2 boys, but I mean, even if I had girls, I need to model what that looks like. And I need to invite them along. Like when this started, Cullen, my oldest, built me an office out of Legos. I asked him to. I asked Cullen and Hayes, both my boys, what they thought of my business name. So I was like, here's some options. What do y'all think? And then Cullen wanted to draw me a logo because mommy, that's what she does. So he wanted to put an effort in.
Yeah.
I asked them about what colors they would feel would represent us well, right? I just invited them along on that journey because I want them to be invested in it as well.
Sure, yeah.
Right? And because it's gonna pull on daddy for a while. Like daddy might not ignore you, but daddy's gonna get pulled away from his usual ability just to be present with you all the time, where I had a situation to where I maybe had more hours to be available, right? And so part of it too is eventually having them up at the office, right? And maybe they get to see, they're not going to be doing a job, you know, maybe with time as they get older and it's age appropriate, they will have some form of a job. But they get to just be learning by osmosis. They see dad and how he interacts with his clients, his professionalism, on time, consistent, smiley, shaking hands, being personable. I keep telling both my boys, make as many friends as you can, like all the friends, right? Because your opportunities are directly linked to who you know, like, and trust you, right? So I would never tell my kids it's acceptable to get a bunch of C's and float your way through school, but candidly, I don't really care. As long as they're trying hard, you can get a C and try hard. It's better than making an A and you didn't try at all and you're not making any friends.
Right.
Like, that's the stuff that there's so few kids, in my opinion, that are being taught that. Everybody's just like, oh, you got to get A's because A's get you into the best college and this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
And we can all agree that system has a lot of shortcomings.
Yeah,
And
it's
so
kind of a relic.
it is. So I want my kids to be able to solve problems and interact with people and be self-motivated to solve their problems.
So previous generations have all held up a value of making life easier for their kids than it was on them. Do you want an easier life for Cullen and Hayes than what you had?
Oh boy. Yeah, that's a deep one, isn't it? So
That's actually one of the questions I wrote down. It was the thing I thought about on the way over here.
Yes and no. So that I have been sitting with that thought process for myself and for my boys, you know, and when I say myself, you know, my wife and I are one together, so by extension, she gets a little flavor of that too. I'm not going to force anything on her, of course.
Yeah, it's not
but
just your kids you're raising.
Yeah, exactly, right. But for the boys, you know, the popular thing is like, are you saving for their college, right? I paid for my college. You know?
too.
Right, and I know what that weight feels like. I know what a $250,000 bill feels like. Would I say it was enjoyable? It was really anticlimactic when I pressed, you know, send or whatever for the last one.
Isn't that wild?
I went to bed, it was like 9:45 and I was like, cool.
Yeah, you expect trumpets.
Right, exactly. Like something, like there should be things that just drop from the ceiling.
No
It should be
confetti?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like nothing. I mean, it was so anticlimactic, and I wasn't disappointed, but I was like, that's it, I
Yeah.
guess. Cool. So like I did look at the zeros, but it doesn't update right away. Like
Right.
takes a couple of days for
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
oh yeah, you're done. So I don't know. Like I think just the journey of learning that and what the discipline was to like give up on all the material things or the experiences. That's the popular thing right now. The people are trying not to have material. You can have experiences that are just as materialistic too.
Oh,
right?
certainly. Yeah, especially if you're posting about them online.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
Right. And so I don't know. I feel like I was listening to someone talk about, G1, G2, G3, G4 wealth levels, right? Like, how do you make your wealth? You're G1. You made
generations.
$1 billion, yes,
Yeah.
$1 billion. Like, how do we get this to G3
Right.
or 4? Because the statistics on it getting to G3 or even G4 are very low.
Tiny percentages.
Right. They usually gets blown somewhere in there, or it gets spread out so thin.
Right.
Because you have enough kids, and generally G2, and I'm not the expert here, but generally G2, they're okay. Maybe their parents got wealthier later in life, so maybe they got to see what it was like before being extremely wealthy and blah, blah, blah. Like, generally that's not the transition that's really tough. It's like G3, it's tough. Like, the grandkids are all doing coke or have all their mental health crises, and I'm not putting that down, but we hear a lot about that from the wealthy folks.
Common story.
Yeah, right, exactly. And then it just can potentially get worse from there. And I think in some ways, I would feel guilty to maybe not allow my kids to become their own people, And so I think not being a bulldozing parent and just letting them have to solve some of their own problems there is no perfect recipe, but I think has the higher statistical chance that child will grow into a content adult.
Right.
And so it's kind of TBD. My wife had her college paid for. She's super type B, super easygoing. She would love to just give them everything. I'm the complete opposite. Right. And so there's going to be some happy marriage in the middle. And I certainly don't want to tell my kids man, you got to figure out for yourself. Get out, join the Navy or whatever. Right. So, we'll in some way, shape or form take that instance as they come about, whether it is paying for college or helping them invest in their first. I'll tell you this. You'd probably love this. So the boys, my brother died, of course, in 2012. And every year on his birthday in June, my mom puts together a thing to take either to the fire department, cookies and stuff like that to support them. And then she also takes some stuff to the local animal shelter because Jeff was a big animal person. And so she puts together all these things, and she always asks us for donations, and so we give them toys and all that stuff. This year, one of Cullen's little friends in the neighborhood did a lemonade stand to donate a bunch of money to some disaster. I think it was in Mexico. I can't remember. Maybe it was fires or something down there. And so Cullen was like, oh, let's do a lemonade stand to support Jeff and donate all that to the animal shelter because he's got a heart for animals too, Cullen does. And so they did that, and they raised $75. And before that happened, though, I sat down with Cullen and Hayes, and I said, look, there's two ways we can do this, right? Mommy and Daddy can front you the money, and then we're going to get recouped on the cost that we gave you, and then we're going to take a piece of that because that's how the world works.
Right.
It's called investing, and Mommy and Daddy are happy to invest in you. But I want you to understand you owe us that money back, plus we need to make something on it.
Right.
Okay? And we're happy to do that. Or you can go from your own piggy bank, and I knew they had enough money to buy the limited supplies for stuff like that, right? And you get to keep all of it. It's your choice.
What'd they pick?
They paid from their own piggy bank.
Really? No kidding.
Yeah.
Good for them. That's
and then
great.
I explained to them that's what's called entrepreneurism, right? And so we were going to donate no matter what. Whatever we invested was going to go right back to them, right? And say, okay, you're donating. And so they're going to do another one, and their goal is to raise, I don't remember, $150, $200 or something to go buy a bunch of toys and have a shopping spree and then go give it to the animal shelter. Really cool, right? Yeah. But, we're trying to find ways to weave that thought process into their mind, give them low risk exposures while they're really young, so they can grow up and just either think that's normal or at least not have a grave fear of taking risks, which I feel like as you get more and more and more and more comfortable, you just get this fear of losing the things. And I've just heard through the years so many people that, and it's not all about wealth, but people that have become successful, and oftentimes wealth comes with that, talk about how, oh yeah, I've been broke, or I've been broke twice,
right.
Or shoot, I've lost 5 companies, I've been sued or whatever, right? Very rarely it's like, oh no, man, it was just easy. It was just like one perfect domino after the next, and and so I think part of it is it's really hard to be content if you haven't had a bit of struggle. I think that also gives you perspective. And so I want to help them have opportunities to experience some governed struggle that's age appropriate.
Are we the first generation since the Great Depression that's raising their kids in a way that you want them to struggle?
I think
I
was thinking about this actually this morning. I think we're the first generation to actually get to parent after being parented. You know what I mean? Like,
get to parent after being parented.
Parenting wasn't a thing. It's only recently become a thing. Before it was, you just had kids because there was no contraception and sex feels good, right? And then a lot of people were rural for the most part. There wasn't a lot of urbanization. So like, well, we need kids because unfortunately some of them are going to die, right? And then we need them to work the farm and all that stuff. And then like, what else do you do?
Yeah.
Right? And so we've changed, and then we had all those awful world wars and stuff and Great Depression and all of those things. And then we finally got into a modern enough world where there was a lot of urbanization, and then now we've created all these things to help fill our time because we have created amenities and a 9-to-5 and a dishwasher and all that stuff. Now that we have sports, or we have luxuries to fill we have hobbies, right? Go to Africa and ask somebody what their hobby is, and I'd be like, what the heck is a hobby, right? We run, right?
Right.
Like, so we have these things to backfill stuff that we've removed, right? So we're kind of still maybe at net zero. We've just relabeled things a bunch of different ways. But one thing we have done is now we have a choice largely for many of us. I know there's some people that struggle to have kids, but we have a choice of, I want 2. No, I want 4.
Right.
I want a boy and a girl.
2 years apart.
And yes, I would love it to be 2
first.
years apart, right? Exactly, you know? And so we have entered into this domain of, you know, as a species in first world living, we're parenting for the first time. You know, that probably really started to happen, in the 60s or 70s? They were writing that initial operating system.
Yeah.
Okay, well, little Billy needs to not say fuck, so we're going to put soap in his mouth.
Right.
He needs to make good grades, right? Let's see, we got to have a curfew, because I can't just have you roaming the streets. Because before it was like, well, the curfew was when the sun went down. Right. You didn't have electricity, and what are you going to do? Go out there and pet the cow, right? We got to start talking about dating, because that's a thing, right? Like, there's all these things that changed, right? And so we might be that first or second generation removed from the initial parenting, and now we're getting to right some of their wrongs, and we're learning about parenting.
Yeah. So
I don't know. I literally had that thought this morning. It's very weird that you asked that question, but I think we're getting a chance to rewrite that playbook, and now we're taking this really jagged little thing and we're starting to knock off some of those edges, and hopefully we're making it for the better. We're going to put our own sharp edges on it. Right. I don't know what my kids will need therapy for at some point. It'll be something that I guarantee you I won't remember. Like, I didn't say it that way, you know? Yeah. But the reality is, you know, we all have our crucibles, and it's good for us to get them. And it's really important to have a good structure around us, because those are the things that help you get through the crucible, and that's what helps you grow as a human. Yeah,
it's interesting that millennials seem to be the generation that bridges the sort of pre-tech, post-tech gap. And that what we're finding is a lot of the things that previous generations held in high regard, comfort, security, job security, having a stable job where you go to the office and you get paid. You had these generational momentum things that happened where Great Depression era just wanted a good job for their kids. And then the kids of the Great Depression era adults had a trade, they had a good job, but boy, an office job would mean I'm not breaking my back as much.
Yep.
If I only had a college degree, yeah, boy, if I had a college degree, I would get that office job. Then you have a whole generation with mountains of student loan debt because they have to go to college in order to be successful. And now a lot of our generation is looking at it going, well, wait a minute, you're different because you use your degree. I don't hardly use my degree at all for what I do professionally.
Sure.
And so, like, man, I don't know that I hold some of the things that my parents' generation held in high regard. I don't hold them in high regard at all.
Yeah.
So then what really matters to me and what my kids experience under my roof is that they be capable when they get out.
That's exactly right.
right?
Which I think is the refinement that we missed on the original round of parenting. Right, and they wrote the rough drafts. You have to start somewhere.
Yeah.
So I'm not passing judgment on like my parents.
No,
they
this
were good
is the
parents.
Moana hill raising thing.
Exactly,
Yeah.
right? And so now it's our job to go, it's not that I'm going to do things differently in some type of anger, I'm going to show them type of way. It's like, okay, that system was the original system. Now, how can I bend that to be one, current and modern, because it's outdated, right? The world has very much changed since the original parenting came around. But then two, it just kind of comes back to principles, right? That's like whenever I'm taking on a client where maybe it's super complex and there's a lot of misgivings and difficulties, failed surgeries, they've got thought viruses and clinical baggage, and maybe they've got diabetes and stuff like that, or whatever. Or the reverse of that, they've got an acre of pain and all the scans are 0, and they've seen everybody and nobody knows what to do with them. In my opinion, sometimes those are the easiest places to start. Like, great, there's nothing like seriously wrong where we'd be nervous, maybe this is cancer, or maybe there's something odd here, right? Great, let's just go back to the basics and let's defocus off pain. And so what I'm getting at is like all of those principles, they're similar in some way, shape, or form, right? Being able to communicate and connect with a person, I hope is never going to go out of style.
Feels timeless.
It sure does,
Yeah.
right? And as much as we have great technology, AI, blah, 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 all this stuff, I mean, unless we do just get plugged into the matrix, like
Yeah.
we are going to need to be able to do this exact thing.
And
right?
there's a difference between this and a Zoom call.
Correct.
Where we might have the same conversation, but the vibe is not there because you're not looking somebody in the eyeballs.
Correct.
Yeah.
And there's going to be that. There's going to be the internal drive to just do things, create, build, work hard, solve problems, be curious. So, in a very broad sense, those are the seeds and skills in my kids that I want to cultivate. And honestly, in my person, that those are the things I want to keep refining and keep improving. Because whether I'm in healthcare, or if I leave this discipline and do something else, or I sell my practice in 15 or 20 years and go, it was a great ride, now I just want to buy an RV and go around the country and sell trinkets on the weekends with my wife and little shows and stuff, like, cool. I still have to be able to connect. I still have to be able to get in there and sell them my cutting boards or whatever the hell, and then, or I do something else. I still got to go and be retired.
Core principles still matter.
Oh, they're ubiquitous. I mean,
Yeah.
they transcend.
Yeah, so talk about that a little bit. You had mentioned if you did leave healthcare. So right now, the vast majority of your time is spent, your professional time is spent building your practice. But if you lost the ability to do that tomorrow and you had to pivot to something else, do you have any idea what that would be?
I don't. I don't. What I'm leaning on there is either I get far enough along and I've made enough money to where I've had enough, or I have enough, right? Doesn't mean that maybe I'm wealthy, but I'm like, okay, cool. Like, now having a large paycheck is not the primary thing, and I've offloaded my kids, and I've offloaded that second story to my house, right? And you can consolidate and go, all right, my nut originally was this big, now it's this big, so I can really find a job or a trade or a skill or a way to make revenue that can match that. Because like a dream of mine would be to be a pseudo resident in Chicago for 1 year. My favorite team are the Chicago Cubs.
Yeah.
Right?
On a religious level.
On a religious level, absolutely. And I've never lived in the city where that team is the primary focus. And when we went up to Chicago and Milwaukee, everywhere I went, because I had my Cubs gear on, oh, what'd you think of the game last night? What do you think of old Craig Counsell? You think he's doing a good job? I'm trying to do my best Midwestern accent,
nice
right?
job.
And so, like, I was just amongst my people. I was standing in line getting an omelet at the Embassy Suites, and we're just talking about the game last night, right?
Yeah.
I don't get that here, and it was just super fun.
Why only a year why would you only want to do that for
I would
a year?
just, because I don't want to have,
experience
well,
it?
I don't, what I want would be to have season tickets. And I want to go to all 81 games, and I want to know Tina, the usher, and I want to know Frank that sits behind Frank's got a loud mouth, and I don't know. He keeps inviting us over for brats, and I think something weird's going on there.
And once he gets to the 8th inning, he's had enough beers.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I want to know the
saucy.
people. I want to be able to talk a little shit. I want to be I want to be immersed in that for just 1 year, just to pretend, right, that I grew up there.
Right.
I just think that would be so cool, right? And so, ultimately, I value freedom to just be able to call your own shots.
Right.
And so if that means I just continue to own a business and it works, great. If that means I just cash in terms of just selling it and transferring that on to someone else that wants to keep that thing rolling, great. If that means something else before that happens, great. But that's definitely like a dream of, it just would be cool to I'm just going to do this summer. We're going to rent a condo for 10 months or a year or whatever the number is. I'm going to go to Cubs convention in January when it's miserably cold. We're going to go down to Mesa in Arizona. We'll rent an RV. We'll stay. We'll go to a handful of games, and we'll have a place in Chicago. We'll be large enough that we can invite friends up, and then I'm going to have 2 or 3 season tickets, so Austin can go with me to as many games as she can tolerate, and then I can invite people like you to come up there.
Right.
Our wives can go have a spa day. You and I can go talk shit at the ballpark or whatever, right? And just have a rotation of people coming in that I can share it with. And it would just be really neat.
Yeah, it's cool. That Paul and I were talking before you came in about how it almost doesn't make sense to plan your life beyond the next 5 years.
Sure.
Because you can look 5 years in history and know, boy, what ended up happening in those 5 years is nothing like what I thought it was going to look
totally.
like. So where I think I'd want to go post what I'm doing professionally currently is likely going to be very different from what I'm going to actually do when that page turns.
Yeah.
Right? So we have a little bit of time left, probably another 10 minutes or so or less. So I've got a couple more lanes I want to run down.
Do it.
What are you optimistic about? We live in a weird time that gets weirder by the day. And we've both sort of reached this conclusion that because we have families, we don't have time for nihilism. So optimism is sort of the antidote to that, right?
Sure.
What are things that you see that are objective, that aren't just your translation of them, that make you optimistic about where the world is or where the world's going?
I don't think you can have optimism without translating it.
Okay.
And so what I mean by that is you and I have this picture in my phone, it's a corner of a wall, and then there's a cylinder floating, and then there's a spotlight here and a spotlight there. You get a circle on this wall if the cylinder's like this, and you get a rectangle on this wall from the shadow being cast, right? And so I do think perspective creates your level of optimism or pessimism or realism or whatever ism you want to assign, right? I do think optimism largely is a choice. I think some people are just naturally, my wife is an eternal optimist, right? I find myself being very optimistic for everybody else but myself sometimes, right? Like you would never ask any of my clients, and I would struggle to bet any one of my clients, like, oh man, he's low energy and super pessimistic. Like I get people all the time like, dude, you need to chill out. It's 8:30 in the morning, right? Like how are you this ready to go? Yeah. I have a client that just like says that to me almost every week. And so I don't know, what do I see in the world? I'm a person of faith. So like I'm going to struggle with that question because I don't think this world is ultimately my end destination. And I don't operate from the idea that I got to get everything out of this life. My optimism comes from having faith in Jesus Christ, right? And so I think when you start to change your mindset and start thinking that it's not about me, and you start taking and orienting yourself towards how can I serve, I think a lot of that stuff kind of gets cleaned up on its own. Yes, there are tough days. Yes, there are moments that challenge the way that you feel. Yes, there are times where you drop F-bombs, you know, but I think if you are doing a good enough job to insulate yourself with people that help point you back at the reasons why you either do things that you do, or like my small group through my church, and being able to offload life struggles, and then they just really help encourage you and push you back. I think optimism really is consistent optimism is either you're like my wife and you just are a golden retriever.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Just happy to be here.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Or you're like the rest of us, where a lot of your optimism, the wellspring is who you're around.
Yeah.
And who influences you. And so, to your question, I'd have a pretty tough time not finding a way to see it in things, but that's because of where my lens is ultimately being shaped from.
So what are the things that you struggle with? Do you have any negative emotions that you struggle with constantly?
Yeah, I mean, you get imposter syndrome for sure.
Yeah.
I think if you're a self-appraising professional, it's hard not to. I think you get better and you move up in belts from a Taekwondo standpoint as you confront it more and more and more and more.
Confront imposter syndrome?
Correct.
Yeah.
You know, just like, because there are days you walk in and like every one of my clients is not doing better. And I'm like, what the hell's wrong with me?
Right.
Like, I suck at this.
Right.
Legit, I suck at this. I'm never going to fix anybody ever again. Everybody thinks I'm a dope. Next week, I'm going to have no patience and I'm going to be broke and it'll be over. I'll be selling insurance. Not that that's a bad thing, but like, that's what's next, right? And then there are some days you walk in and you're just like, oh yeah, I'm special.
In the zone.
I'm good. Yeah. Like, you're lucky you're here because nobody else could have fixed you, right?
Yeah.
Like,
neither of which is healthy.
Right, exactly, right? Yeah. So, you know, I think that's a big one. I think I do suffer from a skeptical mind, which can be great, right? It also, you have to keep it in check, and that's where some of that, you know, imposter syndrome is, because you are questioning, like, and I'm curious, right? I think those two very much can feed each other and create a fire. And so fire can make some awesome brisket, and it can also ruin
steaks.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. I just think, you know, there is an element of you got to put your hands on the wheel and do your best, but there's also sometimes the wheel is just going to be turned and it's out of your control, and you can have your hands on it or not, and you're just going to have to, I'm just going to adapt.
Yeah. Well, drawing this to a close, I wanted to tell you that 20 years of friendship, I keep you around in my life, not just because our wives get along and our boys get along, but I, like you, understand the importance of having people around me that sharpen me and make me better. Mm-hmm. And something I admire about you is your willingness to set a very, very high bar for yourself, and not have much of a tolerance for not having that high bar.
Sure.
Like, you've always been the kind of person that wants to excel at what you're doing and wants things to be put together around him, and you're meticulous about things. And I know that I'm a better person just from having been in your orbit for those 20 years. So for what that's worth, that's now on the record.
Look at that.
Yeah.
Oh man, I really, it's been an interesting week. I've gotten so much praise.
You had a heck of a week.
It's been a week.
Yeah.
It's been an interesting week. And so hearing it from friends, hearing it from clients, hearing it from family members. I had a colleague text me out of nowhere because he saw it posted on Facebook, and just like, I talk to this guy maybe once every 2 years, you know, and he's like, man, this is awesome. I'm really proud of you.
Yeah.
You know, and to say you're proud of somebody, that's different than being like, hey, good luck. Mm-hmm. You have to be an asshole to be like, well, whatever.
Yeah.
Are you sure you're making the right choice? You know, good luck is cheap.
Right.
But to use the P word and tell someone that you're proud of them,
that's the difference between
first and second degree attempt, right? Like, it's premeditated. It's I'm giving a piece away of myself and creating a space of vulnerability to tell you that in some way, shape, or form admire what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
Right. And it's been very humbling to be told that from a variety of people.
Yeah.
So the praise that you give me is even higher because of our relationship, right? And there are times when you've been very honest with me too, and so like I know it doesn't come from a place of just blowing smoke and those types of things.
Yeah.
And I mean, in a lot of the similar ways, it's been 20 years and you're almost always the first person I call when things are either going sideways or going great and I need counsel. And your compass is set in such a way that I know it's going to be right all the time. It's not perfect, but it's always pointing in the direction. It's never spinning. Your compass is honest, it's accurate, it's dependable. Those are all the things that you want in whether it's friendships or disciplines in life. And that's something that I admire and respect, is that there's a lot of wisdom in the words that you choose and the way that you present ideas, and they are never overbearing. It's never, this is how you should do it. It's always centered from a place of, this is some thoughts that I have, and we can talk about them, but ultimately it's more of a giving of thought and consciousness.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's I've had really, really good sounding boards professionally and personally of people that I can call, mainly guys that I can call because there's just that relevance there, where I can say, man, this is what I'm going through and having a tough time making heads or tails of a direction I need to go. And to not have those things in your life and then to not be willing to be that kind of person for somebody else, it just wouldn't be as fulfilling of a life, I think. So,
Sure.
Yeah. Well, this has been good, man. Thanks for making some time for it. We'll definitely do it again.
Of course.
I always enjoy the visit.
Been super fun.
Yeah, man. Thanks for coming out.
Thank you, Tanner.